This man possesses an extraordinarily abnormal physique. Whenever he becomes excited, his reaction speed, thinking ability, and thinking speed increase to 30 times their normal levels. This allows him to perform actions that ordinary people cannot, such as instantaneously predicting the trajectory of bullets fired from guns and flexibly responding to the battle situation. It's definitely an essential skill for flirting. Even more enviable is his childhood friend, Hotogi Shirayuki, who is not only gentle like water and a beauty, but also excels in household chores. Even when she is wronged and cries, she is very easy to console. Moreover, she brings luxurious meals every day, leaving Kinji with a greasy mouth. Even after meals, she takes the initiative to peel oranges clean and hands them to Kinji to aid his digestion. If Kinji thanks her, she would be pleasantly surprised and thank him instead for eating her cooking. Such a woman should belong in heaven. She is rarely found on earth. Today is the opening ceremony. Shirayuki brought a bulletproof vest and a pistol to school, strongly insisting that Kinji must wear them because this morning's fortune-telling not only predicted great misfortune for Kinji, but also bad romantic luck. After dressing, he opened the drawer to take out his secret weapon. Then, using checking his email as an excuse, he let Shirayuki leave first. However, he dawdled until 7:55 a.m., causing him to miss the bus. Thus, he could only ride a shared bicycle to school. As expected, his great misfortune arrived. There was a remote-controlled bomb under the bicycle seat, and an electric skateboard equipped with a submachine gun was following him. If he dared to slow down or jump off, he would either be blown to pieces or riddled with bullets. He then pedaled furiously, trying to shake off the skateboard, but it clung to him like a stubborn plaster. Just when he was nearly exhausted and thought he would die in such a manner, a pink-haired twin-tailed girl named Aria leaped from the rooftop of a nearby 7-story apartment building. She instantly opened a parachute and descended towards Kinji. Drawing a silver and a black large pistol, her bullets, as if enchanted, successively hit the target and shattered the skateboard. Afterward, the girl flew over Kinji's head, because under Kinji's seat was still a bomb. Seeing this, she inverted her body. Kinji immediately understood the girl's intention. At the moment of their contact, they were blown away by the blast and crashed into the gym's storage door. When the unconscious Kinji woke up, he looked at the girl in front of him and couldn't help but exclaim, "Kawaii." But the next second, he saw something he shouldn't have, causing his brain to flood with blood. He quickly diverted his attention. Her 65A bust size revealed she was a flat-chested girl, calming him down. But just then, the girl woke up, furiously pounding on Kinji's head. Suddenly, several skateboards appeared, firing at the warehouse with lightning speed, leaving no time to react. Fortunately, the vaulting box was made of bulletproof material, or else they would have been sent to meet the king of hell. The girl immediately pulled out her guns and returned fire, but in doing so, she unconsciously leaned forward, pressing her whole body against Kinji's face, causing his brain to flood once again and successfully enter burst mode. After the girl temporarily repelled the scooter, Kinji switched to a larger size and grinned. He then gently picked up the girl and called her Princess. He carried her to a corner and then faced the scooter alone. Now he was ready to show his strength. When he opened his eyes again, he had perfectly dodged the bullets and easily defeated the enemy. Though Kinji was very capable, the girl was not impressed at all. She insisted that the recent incident could not be overlooked. Upon hearing this, Kinji explained that it was an act of force majeure, but the girl clearly did not believe such nonsense. Seeing her unrepentant and stomping her foot in anger, Kinji asked her to calm down and think it through, reminding her that he was only a sophomore in high school and would not think of undressing a middle schooler. The girl roared back that she was not a middle schooler. Unable to bear it any longer, she immediately drew her twin guns and started shooting, declaring herself a high school student. However, Kinji quickly subdued her. Yet the girl was no pushover. She countered with a judo throw. Unexpectedly, at some point, Kinji had smoothly taken her magazine. Seeing this, the girl put away her guns and then drew the twin swords hidden behind her back, ready for a melee battle. But the next second, she stepped on a bullet on the ground and fell head over heels. Seeing the girl incapacitated, Kinji turned and left coolly. However, when he returned to the classroom, he discovered that the girl was not only in his class, but also insisted on sitting next to him. His good buddy saw the situation, vacated his seat, and congratulated Kinji on the arrival of his spring. At that moment, the girl came over and returned Kinji's belt. The blonde beauty in class had her imagination running wild. Kinji was without his belt, and since the girl had it, it implied that Kinji had performed some act of removing his belt in front of her. The classmates also teased him, but before Kinji could argue, the girl drew her guns and fired bang, 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 the gunshots echoing through the classroom, her face flushed with anger. The girl declared that romance was utterly boring and threatened to shoot holes in anyone who spoke nonsense again. After school, when Kinji thought he could finally relax at home, Aria unexpectedly showed up at his door, walked into his apartment with her luggage without saying a word, and demanded that Kinji become her slave. She then sat on the sofa and ordered Kinji to buy pineapple buns and coffee. Despite finding it unreasonable, Kinji obediently complied. After Aria enjoyed her dinner, she ordered Kinji to join her in the War Scout Assault Division, a department specializing in combating terrorists. However, Kinji, disillusioned with War Scout for some reason, just wanted to live a normal life and thus refused Aria's invitation. Aria, seeing Kinji so ungrateful, simply kicked him out. Kinji was baffled, as it was his own room, yet he was the one being expelled. Later, Kinji sneaked back, thinking Aria had finally left as the house was pitch dark. However, to his surprise, Aria was still there, enjoying a bath. As he peeked with relish, the doorbell suddenly rang. It turned out to be Shirayuki, who had a crush on him. To avoid a potential disastrous scene, Kinji tried to pretend he was not at home, but he tripped over the doorstep and was forced to open the door. It turned out that Shirayuki wanted to confirm whether Kinji was the victim of the bicycle explosion incident. Upon receiving a positive response, she was so shocked that she almost lost her composure. Afterwards, she angrily declared that she would tear the perpetrator to pieces and then sink them in the ocean mixed with concrete. After venting her anger, she handed Kinji a meal she had prepared by herself and shyly remarked that she felt like his wife after cooking for him twice in one day. Kinji, terrified, wasn't in the mood to focus on these matters and just wanted her to leave quickly. Therefore, he agreed with her statement, which made Shirayuki ecstatically jump for joy. Unexpectedly, at that moment, a voice came from inside the house, and Kinji sensed trouble. He quickly pushed Shirayuki out of the room. "Kinji, you wouldn't be hiding something from me, would you?" Shirayuki, sensing something was off, questioned him. Kinji, frightened by her yandere aura, hurriedly explained that there was no one inside, and surprisingly, Shirayuki believed him. However, as she left, she gave him a kind look, and he sighed in relief, having dodged a bullet. Now he had to deal with Aria, who was taking a bath. He tiptoed into the bathroom, and just as he was about to hide the weapon, an unexpected incident occurred. Aria timed her exit from the bath perfectly, freezing Kinji in place. As their eyes met, Kinji appeared to want to explain something, but instead, he pulled out Aria's underwear. This act turned Aria's face crimson and cemented his reputation as a pervert. Kinji was only met with a beating. The next morning, Kinji, still in his sleep, was woken by a heavy punch from Aria, who was hungry and demanded that he make breakfast. Kinji firmly refused Aria's unreasonable request, since he had figured out how to handle her without fear. However, this was not a sustainable solution, so he sought help from his classmate Rico to gather personal information about Aria. It turns out Aria is an Anglo-Japanese mix, affiliated with the London War Scout Bureau. She started as a War Scout at age 14 and was active across Europe, holding a rank higher than A, an S-class. She claimed that no criminal had ever escaped from her grasp, but Aria admitted the information was not accurate because one criminal had escaped from her, and it was Kinji. Kinji explained that last time was an accident and that he was just an E-class small fry, but Aria did not believe his story and questioned why he was playing dumb. Their overly close interaction nearly pushed Kinji to the edge. With no other choice, he pushed Aria away and promised to return to the assault division, but only to partner with her once. The situation involved a bus held hostage by terrorists with 3,500 cubic units of plastic explosives under the bus, enough to blow up a tank. If anyone on the bus made a wrong move, they would be mercilessly mowed down by a machine gun following them. Kinji, having tuned his watch the night before, missed this bus, which departed at 58 minutes past the hour, luckily avoiding disaster. The day before, Kinji received game tokens from Rico and initially wanted to go alone, but Aria persistently followed him, making it impossible for him to escape her. When they arrived at the arcade, Aria was so captivated by a plush toy and a claw machine that she couldn't move away. Seeing her eager face, Kinji exchanged a stack of game tokens. Unexpectedly, Aria's skills were as immature as her appearance, akin to that of an elementary school student. Kinji could not stand it anymore, so he pushed her aside, inserted a game coin, and activated a hero's essential skill, the secret technique 100% guaranteed claw machine win, which even came with a buy one get one free offer. This made Aria ecstatic. Afterwards, she gave one of the toys to Kinji as a reward. Seeing her smile with slightly squinted eyes, Kinji's heart raced uncontrollably. That night, after returning home, Kinji noticed that the time on his electronic clock and his watch did not match. Thinking his watch was slow, he adjusted it, and consequently, he missed the 7:58 a.m. bus the next morning. This led to the opening scene where Kinji, upon realizing the situation, drove with Aria to the rescue. Meanwhile, the criminals instructed the bus driver to head to the city center. 3 overconfident individuals decided to counterattack, targeting the trailing vehicle they nicknamed the Big Yellow Hornet. Despite being monitored by the criminals, they planned to take action as they entered a tunnel where the surveillance camera would briefly adjust its exposure, providing an ideal moment to strike. However, reality struck them hard because the Big Yellow Hornet was equipped with heat sensors. As they prepared to act, the machine gun responded immediately, delivering a ruthless barrage. Had they not been wearing strong bulletproof vests, they would have been riddled with holes. Kinji and his team arrived just in time, taking down the Big Yellow Hornet with 2 shots. They then jumped onto the bus to search for the bomb. Soon after, Aria found it under the rear of the bus. Although she knew how to disarm it, her arms were too short to reach it. She called for Kinji to help, but he had run to the roof to dismantle a surveillance camera, boasting about his prowess. Seeing Kinji so unprotected, Aria cursed him out, urging him to get back inside the bus. But it was too late. A sports car suddenly appeared. Its machine gun's heat sensor locked directly onto Kinji. Bang! Bang! 2 shots were fired, bullets flying straight towards him. In the nick of time, Aria rushed up and tackled him to the ground, then pulled out her handgun and retaliated. In that disadvantageous situation, she managed to destroy the pursuing sports car, but was injured and fell into a coma as a result. Although the chasing vehicle was neutralized, the bomb on the bus was still active. At that moment, a helicopter flew overhead, carrying a green-haired lolly with a long sniper rifle, who lay beautifully in the cabin. She aimed at the bomb under the bus and softly chanted, "I am a bullet devoid of emotions." Before firing, the bullet soared over the sea, hitting the support precisely. The dislodged bomb fell into the sea, creating a massive splash. When Aria woke up in the hospital, although her injuries were minor, they left a scar, tarnishing the pride she took in her unblemished forehead. Hearing Kinji knocking, she quickly wiped away her tears. Kinji brought the report of the incident, but Aria threw it into the trash without even looking at it, deeply disappointed in Kinji's performance. He clearly had the potential but did not utilize it. Kinji responded that her expectations were one-sided. He did not possess such abilities and had already decided against being a war scout. He could not understand why Aria was so willful. Aria expressed that she no longer had time. In comparison to her own reasons, Kinji's excuses for not becoming a war scout seemed trivial. Despite possessing great strength, he chose to be inactive, merely because his brother, as a war scout, had failed to prevent a yacht sinking incident. Although he saved all the passengers, the public still blamed his brother. Thus, Kinji was deeply disillusioned with the war scouts. One day, feeling gloomy, Kinji went for a walk and unexpectedly encountered Aria, who had just come from a beauty salon, looking meticulously dressed. Kinji thought she was going on a date, so he followed her secretly like a stalker. However, his poor tracking skills were soon noticed by Aria. It turned out she wasn't going to a date, but was visiting her mother at the police station. Her mother had been framed by the IU organization and sentenced to 864 years in prison. Aria was so determined to catch a war scout killer because capturing one could reduce her mother's sentence to 742 years, a sentence spanning 8 lifetimes, 300 years more than what Sun Wukong faced. When her mother learned about this, she was not overly happy but instead advised Aria not to confront the formidable IU organization until she found a partner. After leaving the police station, Aria, like a puppet with its strings cut, burst into tears in the rain. Beneath her strong exterior was a fragile side, which deeply moved Kinji. The next day, Aria didn't come to school. From a friend, Kinji learned that Aria was returning to London, but he chose not to try to stop her. Then, he received a text from Rico. To learn more about the War Scout killer, Kinji had no choice but to meet her. Unexpectedly, Rico didn't play by the rules. She came close to Kinji, even trying to get him to touch her bare thigh. But when Kinji didn't respond as expected, Rico escalated her approach. She turned around, sat on Kinji's lap, and pulled a note from her cleavage. The information on the note shocked Kinji. It turned out his brother had been killed by a War Scout killer. Seeing the timing was right, Rico pounced on Kinji, pressing her lips to his ear and began licking it, which overwhelmed Kinji. Suddenly, his head filled with blood, leading to a dramatic transformation. As his larger self, Kinji picked up Rico's petite body, spun around, and placed her on the sofa, saying, "Little kid, it's time for you to go home and sleep." He rushed out of the room. It turned out that entering this explosive mode had allowed Kinji to deduce from the clues he had gathered that Aria was in danger. He hurriedly rushed to the airport. Just as the plane was about to take off, he managed to get inside and pulled out his War Scout badge, asking the flight attendant to stop the takeoff. However, the plane took off anyway, leaving him no choice but to reunite with Aria first. Just as he was about to reveal the information about the War Scout killer, Aria interrupted him because she was still angry and didn't want to talk to Kinji. Suddenly, a thunderous noise startled Aria, causing her to tremble, but she still haughtily claimed she wasn't scared. However, her behavior betrayed her fear. Seeing her tearful and trembling form, Kinji's mood for jokes faded. Then, almost involuntarily, he took her small hand and comforted her, telling her not to be afraid. Just as the atmosphere between them was improving, the sudden sound of gunshots brought them back to reality. Immediately following, the criminal's voice came through the speakers. Upon learning the mastermind's address, Aria decided she would kill him. When Kinji and the others arrived at the bar, they discovered that the criminal was the flight attendant from earlier. To their surprise, when she tore off her disguise and clothes, it turned out to be Rico. Rico was actually a War Scout killer, her real name being Rico Mine Lupin IV, the great-granddaughter of the infamous French thief Arsène Lupin, because her family always referred to her as the Fourth, never by her name, treating her merely as a genetic successor. She joined IU to prove herself by challenging Aria, who was also a fourth-generation Holmes, thus asserting her status. Their great-grandfathers had tied in a battle 100 years ago. Defeating Aria would prove she had surpassed her great-grandfather. Rico, to provoke Kinji, claimed that she was responsible for the incident involving Kinji's brother, who not only had been manipulated into joining IU, but had also become her boyfriend. Hearing this, Kinji lost his composure and raised his handgun. Just as he was about to pull the trigger impulsively, the plane shook violently again, causing Kinji to fall to the ground, his handgun skidding away. When he looked back, Rico was pointing a handgun at his head. At that moment, Aria, like a fierce little lion, rushed at Rico with guns in both hands. Since War Scouts always wear bulletproof vests, in close combat, bullets are not lethal piercing weapons, but rather blunt force instruments. The battle becomes a test of pain endurance. They then engaged in a point-blank shootout, evenly matched in skill. As Aria ran out of bullets, she grabbed Rico's arms, calling for Kinji to join in. Kinji, hearing this, pulled out a butterfly knife and held it to Rico's neck. However, Rico remained calm, skilled in the use of both swords and guns. Next, her hair seemed to move on its own as she drew a hidden dagger from behind and struck at Aria. Although Aria dodged the first strike, the second strike splattered her with blood. Rico then pulled out a gun and pressed it against Aria's chest, and with the pull of the trigger, Aria lost consciousness and fell backward. Rico burst out into maniacal laughter. Afterwards, a man carried the unconscious girl to a bed, first undressing her, then pulling out a large syringe and plunging it into her chest. He injected the contents directly into her heart. Under the strong effect of the medicine, the girl's heart began to beat again, and she gradually came to. Seeing her disheveled clothes, her face flushed red as she pushed Kinji away. Standing up, Aria remembered she had been knocked out by Rico and picked up her guns, ready to seek revenge. Seeing this, Kinji quickly intervened as the resurrection drug had left Aria completely irrational, no match for Rico in her current state. With no other option to calm her down, Kinji kissed her. As expected, the girl was stunned, and Kinji, overwhelmed by the moment, switched into his second personality. Just then, Rico arrived outside the room. After flashing a charming smile, she used her hair to coil around a dagger and pry open the door. Kinji, unafraid, confronted her directly. He then used his gaze to trick Rico into thinking Aria was hiding behind the door. As Rico prepared to strike, Kinji grabbed an oxygen tank from the bed and threw it at her, followed by a quick gunshot. Just as the bullet was about to hit, Kinji raised his butterfly knife and split the speeding bullet in two, then pulled out his handgun and pointed it at Rico. However, Rico shot behind herself, hitting nothing but air. Aria burst out from the luggage compartment, and with 2 shots, she then drew her twin blades and cut down Rico's hair on both sides. Rico clutched her hair, letting out a cry of distress. As both women raised their handguns, Rico chuckled and then activated her supernatural ability to control a hidden airplane controller within her hair, causing the plane to lose balance, and she seized the moment to dash out of the room. Kinji chased after her, but Rico stopped by a window surrounded by bombs, forcing Kinji to halt his pursuit. Rico invited Kinji to join IU, but he decisively refused. Seeing Kinji's refusal, she detonated the surrounding bombs, blasting a circular hole in the cabin wall, then tore open her uniform to use as a parachute. In her underwear, she disappeared into the clouds right under Kinji's watch. The next second, 2 missiles streaked through the clouds, striking the plane's engines. Realizing the danger, Kinji immediately ran back to the cockpit. Sure enough, the plane was leaking fuel and could only last another 10 minutes. A call from the Defense Department made things worse. Considering the potential catastrophic failure of a landing, the government would not allow them to land at the airport. If they disobeyed, the Defense Department would shoot down their plane. With no other choice, Kinji decided to land on a remote island. Despite the pitch darkness of the island, it was their only option. As the plane was about to land unexpectedly, countless lights lit up the island. It turned out his friends, upon hearing of the situation, had brought vehicles and yachts from the support division on their own initiative. With such teammates, a fight was hardly a dream. After a safe landing with his friends' help, the incident concluded. Aria realized she indeed needed a partner, so she came to bid farewell to Kinji, since he had only agreed to help once. However, at the moment of parting, Aria mustered the courage to ask Kinji if he would consider being her partner, but he still refused. Aria sadly walked away with her luggage, but halfway through, she couldn't help crying. She desperately wanted to work with Kinji and couldn't find anyone better than him. Kinji, watching Aria cry, felt a pang of regret. He looked at the toy on the table and remembered the time spent with Aria, which made him change his mind. But Aria had already boarded a helicopter and was flying away. In a desperate move, Kinji shouted from the rooftop, "Come back, baby! I'm willing to be your slave now." Aria on the plane seemingly sensed something and thus opened the plane door and jumped down, nearly crushing Kinji into a pulp. Unexpectedly, just as Kinji returned home, he heard a thunderous knocking. Shirayuki confronted him, asking why he hadn't replied to her messages. Kinji hurriedly checked his phone, only to find it full of texts from Shirayuki. Realizing he was in trouble, sure enough, Shirayuki used force to split open the door, and upon seeing Aria, she did not hesitate to pull out a several-meter-long watermelon knife, ready to chop the cheating cat inside. Aria was completely baffled, and Kinji frantically tried to explain. The drama between the 2 women and 1 man thus unfolded. This beautiful girl was a typical Yamato Nadeshiko, with long, glossy black hair, dignified and polite, a master of household chores, and the perfect candidate for a future wise wife and loving mother. Yet now, she revealed a demonic expression and chased a little loli with a huge chopping knife. The reason for her fury was that Kinji was living with another girl, which made her lose her rationality, consumed with the thought of slaying the cheating cat. Just as the blade was about to strike the girl, Aria caught the knife barehanded. Having been inexplicably chased for so long, Aria lost her temper and shot 2 bullets at Shirayuki, who easily deflected them with her knife. It turned out Shirayuki was a super-powered individual, a legendary super war scout, the guardian shrine maiden of the Hoshika Shrine, capable of using a supernatural ability called Onido. She was also a super elite among super war scouts. Thus, the room was bound to become chaotic with two S-ranked war scouts brawling. Kinji suggested they calm down and talk it out, but Shirayuki suddenly grabbed his neck, blaming herself for not having the courage, which she claimed caused him to seek comfort in other women. Aria sarcastically commented that if Shirayuki were any braver, she would squeeze him dry. Shirayuki responded by warning not to be arrogant just because she was involved with Kinji. She then pulled out a chain from her sleeve and threw it at Aria, entangling the girl's dual swords. Aria, not adept at discussing romantic topics, blushed instantly and yelled, "He's not my boyfriend! He's just my slave, that's all." Shirayuki was flabbergasted. Kinji stepped in and clarified. Shirayuki lowered her weapon, then shyly asked Kinji if they had ever done anything like kissing. Both showed guilty expressions because they remembered the kissing scene on the plane. Their faces turned red, which made Shirayuki understand everything as she readied her weapon again. At that moment, Aria nonchalantly said, "It's fine because I'm not pregnant." This comment petrified both of them, and Shirayuki even fainted from the shock. The next day, Kinji found Aria reading a manual on youth training. But Aria threw the book at his forehead, calling him a perverted war scout, clearly having learned about the ways of childbearing. During lunch break, Aria called Kinji out. She mistakenly thought that Kinji's transformation into his larger self was a second personality, so to help Kinji switch at will, she decided to train him. The training was to catch a blade with his bare hands, while she practiced backflips nearby. Finally, her skirt wasn't defying gravity anymore, and Kinji almost burst with enthusiasm. After school, Aria wanted to find Shirayuki's weakness to counterattack, because she had encountered many strange incidents today. She was almost killed, constantly monitored, even had water thrown at her in the corridor, and found a note in her shoe cabinet calling her a cheating cat. Aria was sure Shirayuki was behind this. At that moment, Shirayuki was being scolded by the homeroom teacher for her slipping grades, despite being a top student. "Have you been in contact with Durandal?" the teacher asked. Durandal was known to be a kidnapper. The teacher then suggested that Shirayuki hire a bodyguard. Upon hearing this, Aria popped out of the air vent and volunteered herself, as Durandal was also the criminal who framed her mother. Capturing him could reduce her mother's sentence to 635 years. However, Shirayuki refused and stated that if Aria were to be her bodyguard, then Kinji would also have to become her slave. Thus began Kinji's co-living with the two beautiful girls. On the first day of living together, Kinji discovered dangerous items. After Shirayuki finished cooking, she posed the soul-searching question. Should we eat first, take a bath, or eat me? Before Kinji could respond, Aria insensitively interrupted. "Hey, where's my dinner?" Shirayuki turned dark and reluctantly served a bowl of plain white rice, but without any side dishes, leading to another argument. That evening, while Shirayuki was fortune-telling, she suddenly received a distress call from Kinji and rushed into the bathroom. However, Kinji was fine and claimed he never called. Blushed at the sight of Kinji's naked body, her heart pounding uncontrollably. The next second, Shirayuki suddenly knelt and apologized, then declared she would strip to even the playing field and insisted Kinji appreciate her enchanting figure. Kinji tried to stop her, but Shirayuki stripped faster, leading them to become entangled. Unexpectedly, Aria walked in on this scene and immediately prepared to draw the gun strapped to her leg. Kinji could only jump into the sea to avoid her wrath. As the school festival approached, the campus was filled with youthful vibes, and everywhere there were bare legs swaying, a paradise for the boys. However, Kinji was an exception due to his peculiar condition. Seeing too much could send him into a sage mode, forcing him to keep his distance from bare legs. Suddenly, Aria attacked, lifted her leg, and aimed it at his forehead. She was testing the results of Kinji's training to catch blades with his bare hands, because the upcoming confrontation with Durandal, a master of trickery, was imminent. Aria then asked Kinji to check Shirayuki's phone, because Durandal would send a threatening message before kidnapping his target. However, Kinji refused, not believing in Durandal's existence, as he had been closely protecting Shirayuki these past days without any incidents occurring. leading him to think that Durandal was just an enemy Aria had conjured up to save her mother. Upon hearing this, Aria immediately countered, "Although I can't deduce like Holmes, my intuition tells me that the enemy is closing in on Shirayuki." Kinji, who didn't believe in such esoteric notions, suggested that Aria take some time to cool off and let him protect Shirayuki for the next few days. Aria, frustrated by her inability to convince him, angrily drew her guns, aiming to turn Kinji into a beehive. Indeed, trying to reason with her seemed like a death wish. After school, Kinji invited Shirayuki to a fireworks festival. First, he took her to change into a kimono, and then they leisurely made their way to the venue. However, when they arrived, the fireworks had already ended. Yet Shirayuki wasn't disheartened because she was happy just being by Kinji's side. Amid this romantic atmosphere, Kinji found himself staring at Shirayuki's clothes, not for any impure reasons, but because he felt she was dressed too scantily. While Kinji went to buy sparklers, Shirayuki suddenly received a text message that left her with a terrified expression. When Kinji returned and asked her about it, she casually brushed it off. Later, the two sat on the beach, setting off fireworks, the light illuminating Shirayuki's skin. Fortunately, the sparklers finished just in time. The darkness prevented Kinji from seeing anything inappropriate, thus avoiding a transformation into his larger self. After the fireworks, Shirayuki threw herself into Kinji's chest, feeling insecure because she feared Aria might take him away. She asked Kinji not to ask any questions and just to kiss her. Looking at her cherry-like lips and the kiss approaching his mouth, how could he resist? Just as they were about to kiss, an explosion sounded, interrupting them. Kinji thought it was a kidnapper attacking, but it turned out to be a group of kids setting off fireworks nearby. Their kiss was thus left unfinished, leading Kinji to feel like he had seriously lost out. On the day of the school festival, Kinji secretly protected Shirayuki, but was called away by a friend to greet guests. Shortly after he left, he received a farewell text from Shirayuki. Before he could recover from his shock, a teacher grabbed him by the collar to ask about Shirayuki's whereabouts and if she had received any strange messages recently. Remembering what Aria had said, Kinji realized something was off about Shirayuki the night before. Panicking, he ran while calling her phone, but neither Shirayuki nor Aria answered. He cursed himself for not trusting Aria's intuition, which might have prevented Shirayuki's disappearance. While aimlessly searching, Reki suddenly shot at him to force him to calm down, reminding him that losing composure halves one's capabilities. Once Kinji settled down, Reki informed him that there was something unusual about Warehouse 3, which was normally locked. Indeed, Kinji found Shirayuki in the warehouse, which turned out to be an ammunition depot where firearms couldn't be used. He then drew his butterfly knife, and as Durandal was about to abduct Shirayuki, Kinji charged in. However, a shadow suddenly threw a dagger, causing Kinji to trip and fall embarrassingly. Trying to get up, he found his limbs frozen. Shirayuki tried to help but was pulled into the darkness by the shadow. Another dagger flew towards them, but it was deflected by a suddenly arriving knife. Kinji looked up to see the gallant Aria making her entrance, saving his life. Seeing reinforcements arriving, the kidnapper chose to retreat, detonating a manhole cover and causing floodwaters to rush in. When they came to their senses, the two chased after the kidnapper. Unexpectedly, the kidnapper had left Shirayuki bound tightly to a steel pipe. Knowing Aria couldn't swim, Kinji sent her to fetch the keys while he stayed behind to try unlocking the shackles. However, as the floodwaters rose to his shoulders, with great effort, Kinji managed to unlock the first lock just before a sudden wave swept him away. Now, with the warehouse completely flooded, Kinji determinedly swam back and, without hesitation, kissed Shirayuki. The adrenaline rush successfully triggered his transformation, and he split the lockpick in two, quickly unlocking the shackles and rescuing Shirayuki from the water. As they were about to climb up to the vent, another violent wave separated them again. Fortunately, Kinji quickly surfaced, and Shirayuki only choked on some water. At that moment, Aria ran over, but there were traps set by the kidnapper on the path. Kinji urgently stopped Aria, then used his butterfly knife to cut a steel wire, saving her from potentially becoming a headless rider. Noticing Kinji's change in demeanor, the girls realized he had shifted into his second personality. They then joined Shirayuki. But Kinji, now in his altered state, took another look at Shirayuki and immediately sensed something was off. He quickly attacked Shirayuki. Before Aria could react, Shirayuki had a knife at her throat and blew a frosty mist, freezing Aria's right hand. Aria retaliated, but her left hand was also frozen. It turned out the person pretending to be Shirayuki was a kidnapper named Jean Dark, a descendant of the legendary Saint Jean, belonging to a cunning strategist family skilled at hiding in the shadows and manipulating history. Jean invited the girl to join IU, but Aria decisively refused. Frustrated by her refusal, Jean attempted to freeze Aria's stubborn tongue with a kiss. Just as Jean was about to succeed, a swiftly flying chain snatched the knife from her hand. The real Shirayuki made a dazzling entrance and turned the situation around. Faced with a 3-on-1 disadvantage, Jean decisively threw a smoke bomb and chose to hide in the darkness, waiting for an opportunity. Although Aria was eager to pursue, her frozen hands rendered her unable to fight. Shirayuki, putting past grievances aside, helped treat her injuries. Kinji, watching the harem turn their weapons into plowshares, was filled with relief. Unable to bear the sight, Jean, with an unrecognizable step, reappeared. Upon seeing this, Shirayuki stepped forward and resolutely unleashed a forbidden technique. The next second, her knife burst into flames. It turned out Shirayuki's real name was Himiko, skilled in using fire-based Onido techniques. Her knife, Irokane Ayame, combined with her superpowers, was reputed to cut through anything. Jean, intrigued by this, because her holy sword Durandal was also said to cut through anything, engaged in a fierce duel with Shirayuki. However, Saint Shirayuki was reluctant to harm Jean, aiming only at the holy sword during their skirmish, while the two others flirted in the midst of the fight. As the battle waged on, both participants knew it wouldn't last long due to the immense mental strain that stronger superpowers entail. Thus, they were waiting for the right moment to strike. Just as Jean was charging up for her powerful move, Aria seized the opportunity to enter the fray, using her clothing to block the attack and coordinating with Kinji to strike at Jean Himiko. When Jean's great sword descended from the sky, Kinji finally mastered the art of catching blades with his bare hands. At that moment, Shirayuki charged in with her knife, using a super finishing move to split Jean's holy sword in two, successfully capturing Jean. After the incident concluded, Aria used Kinji's room card to bribe Shirayuki into becoming her second slave, with one condition: no indecent behavior. To Shirayuki, however, this condition implied that Aria wanted Kinji all to herself, leading Shirayuki to revert to her darker self, chasing Aria with a large chopping knife and revealing that she had kissed Kinji. Hearing this, Aria, filled with jealousy, fired several shots at Kinji, forcing him to jump into the sea to escape. Meanwhile, on a nearby hotel balcony, a beautiful girl in pajamas holding a glass of red wine displayed a thought-provoking smile. This boy was simply too fortunate. Merely showing up for an appointment, he was eagerly pulled into the room by the girl to experience the bliss of a milky surprise attack. However, Kinji found it odd, considering Aria was usually flat-chested, why she seemed so busty now. The answer was imminent. Forced into sage mode, Kinji deduced from the bust size that the girl pretending to be Aria was actually Rico. When Rico's disguise was revealed, she chose not to flee, but instead proposed to cultivate together with Kinji. Though Kinji was a slave to Aria, as the saying goes, with a good hoe, there's no corner you can't dig. Just as they were about to get intimate, the unromantic Aria burst through the window, interrupting their preparations for having a child. Frustrated by the disruption, Rico pouted but managed to throw a flashbang and escape in the confusion. Aria, startled, crouched on Kinji's head. Because she hadn't heard the door open, she ran to the balcony to check and indeed saw Rico escaping towards the rooftop. They immediately gave chase, and Aria kicked open the rooftop door to capture Rico. Rico, however, scoffed in disdain, and the two exchanged heated words. Just as they were about to come to blows, Kinji intervened to mediate. Considering Kinji's intervention, Aria agreed not to arrest Rico as long as she testified in court for her mother. Unexpectedly, Rico agreed, expressing her fondness for her own mother and understanding Aria's feelings. As she spoke, she began to cry, prompting Aria to comfort her. But then Rico smirked, remarking on her own acting prowess worthy of an Oscar. Rico then revealed that due to the failed hijacking mission, she was expelled from IU, and Vlad, the second in command of IU, had stolen her most treasured possession. Thus, she sought Aria and Kinji's help to steal it back. After returning home, the tsundere Aria was full of jealousy. She had agreed to help mainly to reduce her mother's sentence and couldn't understand why Kinji wanted to be involved. The only reason she could think of was that Kinji must have been charmed by Rico's cleavage, which is why he agreed to help. Kinji was in a tough spot. He couldn't exactly say that he had slept with Rico because she had disguised herself as Aria. The next day, during a biology exam, Rico suddenly appeared next to Kinji. She had decided to personally train Kinji to be able to switch to his larger self at will. First, she had Kinji touch her head to subdue him. Then she buried an automatic pencil in her cleavage and told Kinji she wasn't wearing any undergarments today, instructing him to retrieve it himself. Kinji reached out with a guilty hand, but instead of grabbing the pencil, he accidentally grabbed something else. Just as Kinji was about to make a second attempt, the lights suddenly turned on and the teacher appeared unexpectedly, leading to a socially disastrous situation. Rico quickly handed in her completed exam paper and slipped away, leaving Kinji to be called into the office for a serious talk. After school, Kinji and Rico were seen sharing an umbrella, a scene that Shirayuki happened to witness. Without a second thought, she attempted to slash Rico, who claimed that she and Kinji were in a romantic relationship. Shirayuki laughed it off, noting that the season was full of liars, reminding them that she had kissed Kinji. Rico retorted, "Just a kiss? Kinji and I have progressed much further than that." This greatly shocked Shirayuki, who then resolved to deal with this cheating cat once and for all. Rico used the umbrella as cover to fire a shot, then took the opportunity to flip Shirayuki's skirt, embarrassing her with the revelation that her undergarments were black, a stark contrast to her name. Rico then made her escape, leaving Shirayuki crying in the rain. Later, using the excuse of a foot injury, Shirayuki had Kinji carry her to the nurse's office, which was mysteriously devoid of any staff. Just as Kinji was about to go look for a teacher, Shirayuki used her powers to weld the door shut, trapping him inside. It turned out that she wanted some alone time with Kinji because she was due to return to the shrine soon and didn't want any of the numerous thieves around Kinji to get to him first. So, she decided to make a bold move before leaving by cementing their relationship more intimately. However, when a girl makes such an offer, only a fool would resist, and Kinji, being such a fool, chose to escape quietly through the window instead. The next day, Kinji and Aria followed the GPS to meet up with Rico. But when they cautiously opened the door, they found themselves surrounded by an array of maids. Kinji was shocked. The meeting for the grand theft operation was being held in a maid cafe, seemingly indifferent to the risk of being overheard. The plan was as follows. Kinji and Aria would disguise themselves as a butler and maid to infiltrate Vlad's mansion and then steal the treasure from the underground vault at the right moment. However, Aria flatly refused to wear a maid outfit. The scheming Rico suggested that if she were to be alone with Kinji, they might end up doing unspeakable things. Indeed, once Rico made that comment, the tsundere Aria quickly changed her stance. They then went to a shop specializing in maid outfits where Aria was dragged into a changing room. Unexpectedly, Aria merely donned an apron over her uniform, and Kinji's eyes nearly popped out. Pleased with her efforts, Rico instructed Aria to treat Kinji as her master and to say the line, "What would you like me to do, master?" Aria, too shy to say it, struggled to utter the words, but Rico kept egging her on. After a whole night of training, Aria was finally able to say the line completely, though it seemed the cost was significant. Of course, Kinji couldn't escape her schemes either. She instructed Kinji to meet her in the nurse's office in 15 minutes for a secret rendezvous. However, on his way there, Kinji ran into Jean, a former enemy. Jean, ignoring Kinji's shock, explained that she was at the school as part of a plea deal and was well aware of their plan because she and Rico were close friends. Rico, who had lost her parents at a young age and was subsequently adopted by Vlad, had lived a dreadful life, never having eaten properly and only clothed in rags while confined to a cell. Vlad had given her a condition for freedom. She had to surpass the original Robin. Jean shared this information with Kinji because Vlad was also an enemy of their family. About 120 years ago, the third-generation twins Jean and the original Robin had fought Vlad, the werewolf, to a standstill. Although Vlad was strong, he had been marked by the Vatican's holy knights with a permanent mark that never fades. This mark was his weakness, and to defeat him, one must simultaneously destroy these marks. Although the location of one mark was unknown, the other three were well known. John handed Kinji a crudely drawn map, laughing at herself as a soulful but self-overrated artist. Kinji, speechless, stuffed the drawing into his pocket and proceeded to the rendezvous point, only to find the room empty. As he wondered what to do next, he suddenly heard several girls chatting and walking down the corridor. So he hid inside a storage locker in the room. Shockingly, he discovered that someone had already occupied the locker. As he watched the girls undress one by one, he realized he had been set up by Rico. Suddenly, his phone received a text from Rico challenging him to guess the color of her underwear within 10 seconds, or she would open the locker door. Trembling, Kinji typed in the color and sighed in relief. Just then, petite Aria arrived, and Kinji moved forward to admire her. Yes, just to admire, with absolutely no impure thoughts. However, Aria's allure was too much for him. Just the act of her removing her socks made Kinji gulp, instantly sending him into pervert mode. At that moment, Reki unexpectedly opened the locker. As Kinji sweated profusely, unsure how to explain himself, suddenly a snow-white silver wolf crashed through the glass and attacked the locker. Although Kinji skillfully dodged, his friend wasn't quick enough and was crushed under the fallen locker. The silver wolf then bared its teeth at them, and Kinji lunged to subdue it, only to be thrown off by the wolf. The somewhat intelligent silver wolf, seeing the situation turn against it, charged directly through a teacher standing in its way and escaped through the window. Reacting quickly, Kinji immediately jumped on his motorcycle. As he revved the engine, Reki, carrying a sniper rifle, lightly took a seat behind him. To catch up with the now out-of-sight silver wolf, they needed Reki's supervision. As expected, under Reki's keen tracking, they soon located the silver wolf hiding on the 8th floor of a construction site. Kinji followed the tracks towards the silver wolf, but halfway there, the tracks disappeared. Unexpectedly, the wolf had set a trap. Fortunately, Kinji reacted in time, blocking the wolf's attack with his arm, which could have ended badly otherwise. Although he managed to entangle the wolf with a thin wire hidden in his belt, the clever wolf broke free. Luckily, Reki was prepared, and just as the wolf attempted to leap to another building, Reki pulled the trigger. With a bang, a bullet precisely grazed over the wolf's spine, paralyzing it momentarily through the sudden pressure. Her skill was impeccable. Despite the wolf's thoughts of resistance, Reki's beauty was too much for it. The beast, without hesitation, abandoned its previous master and chose to become the adoring pet under the beauty's skirt. Afterward, Kinji returned to his dormitory only to be met with Aria's fury. Kinji tried to explain that it was all Rico's plot, but Aria interpreted it as Kinji being infatuated with Rico. During his explanation, Kinji inadvertently revealed his feelings for Aria. Indeed, the more beautiful a woman, the more deceitful she can be. Despite having promised to testify for the girl's mother after retrieving the treasure, the moment she got hold of the treasure, she not only turned against them but also planned to kill to cover her tracks. Disguised as Kinji's brother, Rico joined them at the Red Devil Mansion. However, to their surprise, the caretaker of the place turned out to be a teacher from their school. It turned out the teacher often used the mansion's research facilities, inadvertently becoming the caretaker. Since they had a teacher-student relationship, they were smoothly employed. Later, Kinji went to the staff room and pulled out an antiquated tailcoat. Thus, a somewhat shabby butler was born. He then knocked on Aria's room door, but there was no response. When Kinji opened the door, he saw Aria completely absorbed in admiring herself in a full-length mirror, oblivious to his entry. It seemed that the Supreme Maid outfit was much loved by Aria. But the moment she caught Kinji's eye, her expression changed at an unprecedented speed. She then leapt up, landing squarely on Kinji's face, and executed a cheek-neck reversal throw as her ultimate move. Over the next few days, they stuck to the plan, balancing housework with investigating the Red Devil Mansion's security system and the teacher's patterns of movement. After several days of investigation, the weary group headed to the billiard room to relax. However, Aria's washing board seemed a bit larger than usual under the maid outfit. Due to the perfect length of her skirt, her pert backside swayed tantalizingly, making it utterly impossible for Kinji to concentrate. Just then, as if sent by divine intervention, thunder rumbled suddenly, scaring Aria into clinging tightly to Kinji. After the thunderstorm, They each returned to their rooms for a scheduled three-way communication. According to Aria's investigation, the underground vault was surrounded by infrared beams, and even stepping on the floor would trigger an alarm. But all of this was anticipated by Rico. She tasked Aria with distracting the teacher, while Kinji was responsible for stealing the cross. On the final day, Aria lured the teacher out of the basement under the pretense of admiring roses. Meanwhile, Kinji, donning Special Forces gear, opened the floor beneath the billiard table and jumped into the tunnel he had been digging for 2 weeks, finally hanging into the underground vault. In the dimly lit vault, the cross appeared unguarded on the display shelf. However, using infrared night vision goggles, Kinji could see that the area around the cross was entangled with a complex web of infrared beams. Following Rico's instructions, Kinji assembled parts from his pocket into a steel wire track that navigated the infrared beams in a curvaceous path to the front of the cross. He then hooked the cross and slowly reeled in the rope by turning the handreel. However, time was running out for Kinji as the teacher was about to return. In this urgent situation, Rico blocked Aria's line and, using Aria's voice, spoke flirtatiously to Kinji. As expected, this had an extraordinary effect on Kinji, who, enraptured by the coy voice, entered an explosive mode. The transformed Kinji, no longer feeling any pain or tremors, swiftly secured the cross and replaced it with a fake in a fluid motion. Afterward, Kinji handed the cross back to Rico. Upon receiving it, Rico asked Kinji to untie the ribbon on her head. Unexpectedly, at the moment he untied the ribbon, Rico seized the opportunity to kiss him, sending Kinji back into explosive mode. It turned out Rico had not given up on defeating Aria and planned another showdown at the peak. The young girl thought that after retrieving the cross and relying on the legacy power of the relic, she could defeat Aria and prove herself superior to her great-grandfather, thereby gaining her freedom. However, this was all her delusion. Just as she was boastfully declaring she would finish off Aria, she was suddenly struck from behind by a stun gun, causing her to fall to the ground numb and twitching. Then the teacher appeared, holding a pistol, and was backed by 2 silver wolves, threatening Aria and Kinji not to make any rash moves. It turned out this was all the teacher's conspiracy. After retrieving the cross, he stuffed a fake into Rico's mouth, showing no mercy. The cross was intentionally let stolen by Kinji, all to plunge Rico into deeper despair. After days of enduring painful screams and cries of despair, which were necessary to summon Vlad, a flash of lightning transformed the teacher into a werewolf covered in fur. Seeing this, Aria fired several shots at him, but they were ineffective. As the silver wolves almost tore her apart, Kinji intervened just in time, mimicking Reiki's gun suppression technique to paralyze the wolves. Meanwhile, the bullets that had entered the werewolf's body were not only expelled, but also healed his wounds instantly. It turned out that Vlad's true identity was a vampire, who could evolve his genes by consuming human blood, which had given rise to his werewolf form. Rico confronted him. "You promised me freedom if I defeated Aria." Vlad coldly responded, "Would you keep a promise made with a dog? Although you are weak, you are still a good breed. A successful mating might produce excellent offspring." Tearful and desperate, Rico turned to Kinji for help. Aria put away her guns and pulled out dual blades, charging at the werewolf with Kinji following close behind. Aria slashed at the werewolf's arm while Kinji caught Rico as she fell. Under Aria's cover, he carried the injured Rico away from the battlefield. He then returned the cross he had stolen from the werewolf to Rico, who revealed that the werewolf's 4th weakness was in his chest. After Aria emptied 2 magazines, Kinji came to support her. He instructed Aria to target the other 2 weaknesses, leaving the remaining 2 for him to handle. However, things were not so simple. Although they hit all 4 weaknesses simultaneously, and the werewolf appeared to kneel as if defeated, it was all an act. His chest was not a real weakness. The next second, the werewolf roared loudly, not only blowing Aria away but also snapping Kinji out of his explosive mode. Now, in his weaker form, Kinji was ineffective, merely standing still and shooting, which led to him being flung out of the building by the werewolf's club. He flew out like a projectile, nearly becoming a splat on the ground, but Rico arrived just in time to save him. Meanwhile, Aria struggled evenly with the werewolf until a sudden thunderclap scared her into losing her combat ability. The werewolf seized this chance to strike her with a hammer, but Rico saved Aria just in time. Since defeating the werewolf required Kinji to be in explosive mode, Rico provocatively played up a Yuri scenario in front of him, then dropped them both down, shocking Kinji and triggering his transformation. Blood surged, and Kinji successfully entered explosive mode. Quickly, he devised a perfect plan. He directed Rico and Aria to attack the other 3 weaknesses, while he took responsibility for the 4th. Initially, his bullets did not target the weaknesses, intentionally causing the werewolf to lower his guard. The next second, Kinji performed a breathtaking maneuver. Unexpectedly, the bullet changed its trajectory due to friction and shot directly into the werewolf's mouth. Indeed, the werewolf's 4th weakness was his tongue. Because he initially made a protective movement over his mouth, Kinji deduced that it was his weak point. The next day, Rico fulfilled her promise to testify in court for Aria's mother. Aria was so overjoyed that she completely forgot she was still trying on clothes. Kinji picked up the breast pads that had fallen from the girl's outfit. This scene made Aria extremely embarrassed, and so, accompanied by the sound of Kinji getting beaten up, the story also came to an end.